You eat it, you cook it. But do you really know what rice goes through to reach your plate? Here's the truth. It's chaos behind the scenes. Over 500 million tons of rice are moved around the world every year, and most of it travels through broken roads, unstable borders, and warehouses one step away from disaster. One delay, one pest, one storm, entire shipments go bad, millions of dollars gone. And yet, it works, somehow. Let's get something straight right off the bat. Harvesting rice isn't the end of the story, not even close. If anything, it's the start of a whole new chain of motion, full of small victories, daily challenges, and the kind of precision that would make an engineer raise an eyebrow. Most people never think twice about what happens after the rice is cut, but that part, that's where things get gritty and oddly impressive. Picture this, a field somewhere in Southeast Asia or Sub-Saharan Africa. It's early afternoon, the sun's still punching down, and the rice paddies are buzzing with quiet energy. Workers move in rhythm, gathering the stalks and getting them ready for what's next. That's threshing, the process of separating rice grains from the stalk. Now, depending on the tools at hand, this can look wildly different. In some places, it's all done manually, using wooden flails or foot-powered machines. In others, it's a mechanical operation, where small threshers chew through the stalks like hungry machines on wheels. On large farms, high-end harvesters handle everything at once, cutting, threshing, and collecting in one motion, backed by smart agriculture tech that logs yield data in real time. But the real tension comes after the grains are threshed. They're still wet. Not soaking, but moist enough to be a problem if left unchecked. Moisture invites all kinds of trouble. Mold, spoilage, and insects love it. So drying is the next major task, and it's not just about leaving it out and hoping for sun. Farmers use everything from tarps and concrete slabs to solar dryers and fuel-powered machines. It's a mix of old-school know-how and newer gadgets. In smaller villages, you'll see families turning rice with wide wooden paddles every few hours, sometimes even timing it to the sun's path across the sky. Elsewhere, modern dryers pull warm air through stacks of rice, drying tons in just a few hours. The balance? Getting the moisture down to about 12–14%, give or take, without cooking the grains in the process. And that's when milling steps in. Milling is where the outer husk gets removed and the rice starts looking like the stuff most folks recognize. It can stay as brown rice or go through additional stages to become polished white rice. This part's fascinating because it combines precision with brute force. Small operations might have a mill that looks like a noisy, vibrating shed. It works, but it's rough. On the flip side, commercial mills use multiple machines: dehuskers, separators, polishers, graders. These lines sort the good from the broken, identify color inconsistencies, and sometimes even laser scan for defects. It's all about turning a bulk product into something market-ready. This is where technology meets agriculture in a very hands-on way. Real machines, real dust, and real results. Once milling wraps up, bagging kicks in. Depending on where it's going next, rice can be packed into small consumer-ready bags or loaded into 25 to 50 kilogram sacks. Some use traditional jute, others go with polypropylene, and in advanced setups you might find vacuum-sealed options. These aren't just packaging choices, they're survival strategies. In hot, humid regions, the wrong bag can mean a ruined batch, so farmers, millers, and exporters make those decisions with care, choosing between breathable options and moisture barrier solutions, depending on destination and expected shelf life. What happens next might be the most underrated part of the whole system: local transport. Getting bagged rice from farms to aggregation points can feel like a puzzle with missing pieces. In rural Ghana, it might ride in a wooden cart pulled by donkeys. In Vietnam's delta zones, boats cruise through narrow waterways stacked high with sacks, barely floating above waterline. In other spots, it's motorbikes. Yep, small 125cc bikes, somehow balancing 100 kilograms of grain. These aren't ideal conditions, but they get the job done. Agroforestry-based farming communities, with their often remote fields, depend on this kind of flexible, informal transport system. At the aggregation points, think of them as rural hubs or depots. Rice is weighed, logged, inspected, and often rebagged. These spots range from dusty lots under shade cloth to clean, efficient collection centers with digital scales and solar panels. Here's where things start syncing with broader networks. Tech has snuck in through mobile apps, QR-coded tags, and online ledgers. Even small-scale farmers are logging harvests on phones now thanks to simple agri-platforms that help with everything from pricing to scheduling. Once aggregated, rice heads to silos or warehouses. These are often the first proper storage facilities the rice sees. In high production regions, silos can tower 3 stories high and hold thousands of tons. Inside, systems manage temperature, airflow, and humidity. No fancy gimmicks, just smart tech built to protect a crop that can still turn south if mishandled. In other cases, you'll find insulated warehouses packed with stacked bags, with rat guards on every door and sensors pinging alerts if things heat up too much. Modern storage doesn't just preserve, it tracks and responds. Now, when it's time to move on, the rice is prepared for bulk transport. Trains, long-haul trucks, even river barges come into play. In the US, hopper cars and containerized freight are standard. In parts of Africa or Asia, rice rides in convoys of flatbed trucks or lorries, tarped tight against rain and dust. It's not unusual to see an entire family riding with the rice, ensuring it makes it safely. Again, tech plays a role. GPS trackers, mobile dispatch, and automated route planning are becoming the norm, even in places you wouldn't expect. Finally, the rice reaches the coast. Ports like Abidjan, Bangkok, or Los Angeles aren't just shipping lanes, they're high-stakes checkpoints. Rice is moved from trucks or rail cars onto ships, sometimes packed tight in containers, other times poured into hoppers built for dry bulk. The ships themselves, many are designed specifically for grains with ventilation systems, temperature sensors, and motion controls. They keep the rice dry, cool, and safe on voyages that can stretch for weeks. Here's something you might not know. Those shipments aren't just drifting across oceans without a clue. They're being tracked, monitored, sometimes even inspected mid-journey. With smart shipping containers, companies know if the humidity spikes or if the temperature rises too high. They can alert port staff before the ship even arrives. That's technology in agriculture logistics, invisible but critical. So while most people are just scooping rice into a pot, somewhere behind that moment is a whole system moving grain from muddy fields to pristine store shelves. It's built on muscle, memory, and increasingly on digital brains that don't sleep. But don't let the smooth process fool you. Things can and do go sideways fast. The next piece of the puzzle? That's where the headaches live. Think bad roads, political chaos, surprise tariffs, and bugs that won't quit. Let's be honest. Moving rice at scale isn't just about getting from point A to point B. If only it were that simple. Behind every shipment, there's a balancing act that can wobble at any second. Sure, rice is one of the more shelf-stable foods out there, but that doesn't mean it's invincible. A few small slip-ups, too much moisture, a bit of mold, or a broken link in the logistics chain, and a whole container can go bad faster than you'd expect. Let's start with the obvious: perishability. A lot of people assume that once rice is dried, it's good for years. Technically, yes, but only if it stays dry and clean. That's the key. Rice might look tough, but it breathes, literally. It's hygroscopic, meaning it soaks up moisture from the air. That means if it's stored in a humid warehouse or stacked too tight in plastic without ventilation, you could end up with condensation, which leads to clumping, spoilage, and a thriving buffet for insects. In places like West Africa, where humidity levels swing wildly and warehouses might be more tin-roofed than temperature-controlled, keeping rice dry becomes a daily battle. Then there are the pests: weevils, moths, grain beetles. These little guys have been sneaking into sacks for generations. Farmers might spray, fumigate, or even hang sachets of neem leaves in storage areas, an old-school method that still holds up in many agroforestry systems. But pests are persistent, especially when rice moves across borders. You could do everything right in the field and still have a cargo container infested by the time it docks overseas. And when customs discovers contamination, game over. That batch gets rejected, or worse, destroyed. Now zoom out a bit and think about infrastructure. Rice often comes from rural areas, places where roads aren't always roads. They're more like intentions, muddy, cratered trails that turn to rivers when the rain hits. In Southeast Asia, narrow backroads snake through mountainous terrain. In the Philippines, you might need to ferry rice across 3 islands before it even sees a port. In Nigeria, potholes can swallow half a truck's axle if the driver's not careful. And that's assuming there's a truck at all. Sometimes it's a borrowed van, a bicycle, or an ox cart doing the heavy lifting. These last-mile connections are the weak links. They slow everything down, jack up fuel consumption, and in some cases, cause outright damage to the product. And while we're at it, let's talk about political instability. Because even if your rice is dry, clean, and packed tight, that doesn't mean it's safe. In places like Mali or Myanmar, sudden policy changes or civil unrest can close borders overnight. Checkpoints become choke points, warehouses get looted. Export licenses get suspended or revoked. For traders and exporters, that's not just a headache, it's a financial gut punch. A delay of even a few days can mean missing shipping windows, losing buyers, or racking up storage costs that eat into margins. One farmer in Burkina Faso once said, "It's easier to sell rice in Paris than to get it out of my own region." That's the kind of frustration that doesn't make the headlines, but it shapes the global trade game more than most people realize. Ports? Oh, don't get started on ports. Delays there can be brutal. Whether it's Lagos, Chittagong, or Manila, you'll find long queues of trucks, chaotic container yards, and not enough cranes to go around. A shipment that arrives on time could still sit in a holding pattern for days or weeks, waiting for clearance, inspection, or documentation. Every extra day costs money, fuel burns, workers wait, customers get anxious, and that's if the paperwork goes through cleanly. A missing stamp or an outdated certificate can push everything back indefinitely. Now layer in tariffs and export restrictions. Countries tweak these like they're adjusting the volume on a stereo, up one week, down the next. India, for example, has flipped between restricting and opening up rice exports based on domestic price swings. When local food inflation spikes, exports get shut down to protect national supply. Fair enough, but when you're on the shipping end of that policy swing, it can mean sitting on thousands of tons of rice you can't move. And because rice is a staple, not a luxury item, every government keeps a close eye on it. That means rice traders deal with more red tape than almost any other ag commodity. Labor? That's another delicate lever. A lot of rice movement still depends on human hands. Loading, unloading, stacking, sealing. It's not all automated, especially not in emerging markets. And labor shortages can happen for all sorts of reasons. Harvest timing, festival seasons, even health scares. When COVID hit, some ports operated at half staff for months, and rice shipments got jammed up like LA traffic during rush hour. Suddenly, there were backlogs of grain sitting in port warehouses, attracting pests and draining profits. And when labor is available, costs aren't always predictable. Wages, fuel, equipment rental, it all fluctuates with the market, sometimes dramatically. Fuel prices might just be the biggest wild card of all. Transporting rice overland is fuel-intensive, especially in areas without rail infrastructure. A sudden jump in diesel prices can send transport costs through the roof. That doesn't just impact the shipper, it ripples all the way back to the farmer. If transport eats too much of the margin, buyers offer less for the raw rice. And that starts the cycle all over again. Lower income, less investment in drying or milling, more post-harvest loss. And then there's the market itself. Fragile, emotional, and sensitive to even the tiniest tremors. The global rice trade is like a tightrope act. Ship too early and you might miss peak prices. Wait too long and storage costs nibble away at your margin. Whether in Thailand, a protest in Senegal, or new fertilizer regulations in India can all swing the needle. Everyone in the supply chain, from the farmer to the freight broker, is watching prices and making calls based on instinct, history, and sometimes sheer luck. So while the idea of transporting rice may sound straightforward, cut, dry, bag, ship, the reality is a maze of moving parts. And if any of them hiccup, even for a day, it can unravel weeks of planning. It's a delicate dance that requires grit, foresight, and a deep respect for both nature and numbers. Still, despite all that, the industry keeps moving. Why? Because people are hungry, and rice is essential. So naturally, those in the game have started turning to new ideas. Tools, systems, and strategies that help keep things smooth, no matter what the world throws at them. Rice might be an ancient crop, but the way it's handled today, that's changing fast. Farmers, traders, and exporters are no longer relying solely on instinct and tradition. There's a quiet tech revolution happening in the background, and it's reshaping how rice moves, how it's protected, and how value is preserved from harvest to table. One of the most effective upgrades has come in the form of hermetically sealed bags. These airtight containers might not look flashy, but they've become a frontline defense against moisture, mold, and pests, especially in humid regions where rice used to spoil quickly in regular sacks. They're being adopted everywhere from rural farms to commercial warehouses, helping smallholders keep their grains safer for longer. Vacuum sealing, especially for aromatic varieties, adds another layer, locking in freshness and flavor during long hauls. What used to be a guessing game is now a system of constant updates. GPS trackers in rice trucks, even on smaller regional routes, give real-time insight into location, delays, and environmental conditions. These tools don't just serve the big players anymore. Co-ops, local buyers, even independent farmers are getting in on smart logistics. With mobile-based platforms, shipments are scheduled, adjusted, and monitored with a few taps, tightening the whole chain. In regions where infrastructure remains patchy, people are getting creative. Floating warehouses keep rice dry and accessible in flood-prone deltas, while camels still carry grain across deserts, now tagged with QR codes linking to digital records. It's a mix of ancient and new that actually works. And then there's blockchain, quietly turning rice into a certified, trackable asset. For premium exports, every hand the rice passes through is logged and verified. That's not just paperwork. It's protection against fraud and a trust builder for buyers who care where their food really comes from. While the tools are getting smarter, they're also getting more accessible. The goal isn't high-tech for the sake of it. It's simple. Keep the rice clean, safe, and moving, no matter where it starts or ends up. Crazy, right? Who knew something as familiar as rice had a story this wild behind it? So now that you've seen what really goes on, the risks, the tech, the hustle, what surprised you the most? Was it the high-stakes tracking, the desert camels, or maybe the fact that one tiny mistake can ruin a whole shipment? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read everyone. And hey, if you found this eye-opening, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We've got more mind-blowing videos coming your way about how everyday things actually move across the globe. Trust me, you won't look at your kitchen the same way again.